call to order the ONCC Technical Committee for October 19th. And can we call the roll?
Bensonville.
Here.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Here.
41st Ward.
Here.
Hanover Park.
Here.
Oh, sorry, I missed Displains. Harwood Heights. Itasca. Mount Prospect. Norridge.
Here.
Palatine. Park Ridge.
Here.
River Grove. Rolling Meadows. Where'd she go? She was there. Lori, are you here? Schaumburg.
Here.
School District 59.
Here.
And Wooddale. Did I miss anyone?
Palatine's here. You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. And I did see Rolling Meadows, but now I don't see her. So, but we do have a quorum.
All right. And then for the minutes, is the most recent minutes the ones that you sent out, Maura? It was dated April 20th, I believe.
Yeah, I believe so.
That's the most recent. We haven't seen each other since April.
That's what I found.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from April 20th, 2021?
Wow. Norwich moves to approve the minutes from April 20th, 2021.
Hanover Park seconds them.
All right. Mr. Conkle with the second. Maura, can you call the roll?
Bensonville.
Yeah.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Yes.
41st Ward.
Yes.
And I'm just checking Displains is still not on, right? Okay. Hanover Park.
Yes.
Harwood Heights. Itasca. Not here. Mount Prospect's not here. Norridge.
Yes.
Palatine.
Yes.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
River Grove. Did Dennis join us? No, Dennis. Rolling Meadows. Still no. Schaumburg.
Yes.
School District 59.
Yes.
And just checking again for Wooddale. No. And then I see Harwood Heights. Are you with us?
Yes.
Okay. And then do you vote yes on the minutes?
Minutes of the previous meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes.
All right. Well, time flies when you're having fun. Feels like just yesterday we were here, but I guess that was back in April. All right. We'll hand it off to Vildana to go over the noise monitor updates. Vildana.
Good morning, everyone. It's been a while, but we haven't really received that many portable monitor requests for residential deployment. In total, we received 3 since April. 2 of those requests from Park Ridge and 1 from Wooddale. We have deployed all 3 monitors and retrieved 2 of those. We have issued reports for the 2 monitors, and currently 1 is still deployed in Park Ridge. We did not have any requests for municipal portable noise monitors. And Brian, if you can please pull up the report for the long-term portable monitor, that's for site C, which is in Chicago Ward 39. And I don't think we have reported DNL since February, so I'm going to read off a bunch of numbers from March to August. So the average aircraft DNL for the month of March for the site was 51.8. For April, it was 54.8. For May, it was 55.3. June, 55.8. July, 55.6. August, 54.1. And this site, we're planning to replace with a permanent noise monitor. Now to the permanent noise monitors, we plan to provide more of an update at the next meeting, but today I'll just remind everybody that we had 3 sites that we were relocating from a utility pole to its own mast. Those were Site 7 in Des Plaines, Site 23 North Lake, and Site 28 in Schiller Park. We had previously commissioned Site 23 North Lake. Since April, we have also commissioned Site 7 in Des Plaines. That was completed on May 12th of this year. We are still working on the site in Schiller Park. We did initiate the work at the beginning of the year, but there were some delays with ComEd, and our work is completed. We're just waiting for ComEd to energize the site, which should happen in the next 2 weeks. We also installed a new permanent noise monitor in Niles. That's Site 45, and that site was commissioned on May 21st of this year. So we're already recording data for the site since, I believe, June. And then this year, we were also working on 3 Chicago sites. Those are 3 new permanent noise monitors. One was Site 39 in Chicago Ward 39, Site 40, Chicago Ward 40, and then Site 46, which is going to be the replacement site for the long-term portable Site D. That's in North Park Village, Chicago Ward 39. Now, with these 3, we also initiated the work at the beginning of the year, but there were some delays with the permit. Apparently, our sister agency, CDOT, has new permitting requirements, and now it's a 30-step process to get these permits granted. So we're actually just this month, our contractor obtained the building permit. We're just waiting for the traffic permits. They need to block off some parking spaces to access the site. So as soon as those are granted, we can work at these 3 and hopefully complete by the end of the year.
All right, thank you, Vildana. Does anyone have any questions for Vildana or in regards to noise monitors? Seeing none, we'll hand it off to Ryan for an update on COVID-19 pandemic impacts at O'Hare International Airport.
By the way, River Grove's here.
Good to see you, Dennis.
Good morning, everyone. As a standing agenda item, we're continuing to provide updates on the operation as well as passenger levels at the national level, as well as O'Hare and Midway, seeing how the recovery is going from the COVID-19 impacts over the last year and a half. This slide shows the daily national TSA checkpoint throughputs for passenger levels. Again, this is all domestic airports, and we've updated this through October 12th, 2021. As you can see, the yellow line there is our current 2021 levels compared to the red 2019 levels. We continue to see a return of demand levels, although there has been a bit of a leveling off at around 80% of where we were in 2019. The 4th of July weekend, Labor Day weekend, and some of the weekdays in September, however, did see higher levels than we actually saw in 2019. And you can see some of those yellow spikes overlap the red dips there at those dates. So we do see some peak demand levels that are tracking better than what we saw in 2019, which is a good sign. But again, a bit of a leveling off through the fall and here into the winter months as we end out the year. The next slide shows O'Hare specific passenger throughput levels based on TSA numbers. This is updated through September 25th. As you can see, we did kind of level off through the summer months, but continue to see some spikes in demand on holiday weekends and some weekdays in September. Much better than where we were last year, however, still a bit below 2019 levels. Next slide is the Midway throughput levels, a little bit better story at Midway. Again, the travel demand as of recently has still been majority of the leisure traveler. So the business traveler still hasn't quite resumed those 2019 levels. Midway Airport, of course, is served mostly by Southwest Airlines, and their clientele is mostly the leisurely traveler. So there's no surprise that their operation levels recovered a bit quicker than what we've seen at O'Hare to date, but still a little bit below 2019, but levels are getting closer to where we were pre-pandemic. These are the operation levels comparing to 2019. Yellow again is 2021, updated through September. The average for September, we're down about 15% where we were in 2019. Overall for the year, we're still looking at a 28% reduction compared to the 2019 levels on average. Midway, a bit similar but better story, 11% reduction compared to September of 2019. Overall average reduction of 22% comparing to the annual average for 2019. And again, we did see the demand increase over those summer months as we expected, and then we're seeing a bit of a leveling off as we end up the year into the fall and winter. This slide shows the aircraft operation levels of some of the major domestic markets. We've color coded these by region to give you some idea of where a lot of the demand is coming from. And the story continues to be the South and Southwest continue to be the markets that are recovering the quickest. You'll see Midway and O'Hare there in red, the Midwest markets. And again, the gray markets, the Northeast are the ones that are still struggling to recover as international traffic has not resumed as much as domestic at this point. And also we have color coded by cargo specific hubs, Indiana, all the way on the left. You can see they're well above 100% of where they were in 2019. Palm Beach, again, operation levels well above where they were in 2019. So a lot of warm markets are still driving the demand levels at this point. This slide shows the comparison of passenger levels at O'Hare versus cargo operations. Excuse me, passenger operations versus cargo operations. On the left in green, you have our 2021 operation levels by dedicated passenger carriers. You can see that spike of recovery into the summer months and then a bit of a leveling off. For cargo, you can see that we maintained the demand level that we saw in 2020. And we continue to track a bit above where we were last year. As we go into the winter months, we expect that demand to climb, of course, as we get into the holiday season. And of course, important to point out that the scales on these two graphs are quite different. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but the idea is to show you the tracking of the demand levels for both passenger and cargo. And the last slide here that you're all familiar with is just the reminder that the aviation system has undergone many shocks over the years. And the story is the system has always recovered, and we fully expect this latest shock, although significantly worse than anything we've seen before, to continue recovering. And that completes the update on the COVID-19 impacts.
Thank you, Ryan. I think I just want to remind everyone why we have this as a standing item. All the work we do for quieter skies, nothing will impact the skies quite as much as what COVID did to the skies. So it's an important reminder. And I think we see some of the lingering effects of that and talking to our residents as flights resume to normal. Sometimes it sounds like it's worse than historically. And there's a lot of reasons to that, and some of that is perceived and some of that is actual. So we're going to keep this as a standing item for the time being as we continue to view the recovery of O'Hare. Ryan, what is the flight makeup between Midway and O'Hare for Southwest? What are the number of operations at Midway versus O'Hare? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's significantly at O'Hare, it's significantly smaller, but I don't have the breakout off the top of my head. But that's something we can quickly find out for you.
Anecdotally, I was just surprised. It seems like there's quite a few of Southwest for the number of gates they have to the number of operations. It seems like it's impressive.
Yeah, it's definitely, they've taken over a couple of gates, but still, at Midway, they're still well above 90% of the,
Right.
The gates at Midway. So it's still a small fraction, but it's definitely not something that they were, just using one or two flights out of O'Hare.
Right. All right. Somewhat segue into that. We'll move on to the second quarter 2021 fly quiet report. Ryan.
All right, let me pull up the quarterly report. So we have the second quarter 2021 Fly Quiet Program report, which covers the months of April, May, and June of 2021. Pages 1 through 4 provides highlights and overview for the quarter. On the bottom of page 1, we have our highlights for Fly Quiet mode tracking for the second quarter. The average start and stop times for the quarter were 10:24 p.m. Start time and 6:07 a.m. stop time, with an average nightly time of 7 hours and 43 minutes in flight quiet mode, and average nightly operations in flight quiet mode were 97. And that 97, as you recall, during the IFQ, our averages were right around 100. So we continue to see our numbers inch closer to kind of where we were pre-pandemic levels as far as nighttime operations. Also on this diagram, each of those little purple triangles represents a daily start and stop times. And at the end of this report, we have a full log of all the nightly flight quiet mode start and stop times for the second quarter. Page 2, we have highlights of operation levels. The most used nighttime departure runway in the second quarter was 28 right with 37% of the operations. The most used nighttime arrival runway was 28 center with 31% of the operations. We'll go over more of the runway use on the runway use reports coming up. Nighttime operations represented 10% of the overall daily operations, and we have a breakout of the different air carrier categories. Percentages, United American, of course, make up the vast majority of the nighttime operations with 36%, 21% being the other domestic carriers. 31% of the operations is dedicated cargo. Top of page 3, we have our highlights of the nighttime departure track report. This report measures the flight quiet mode deviation in nautical miles from our preferred flight tracks, and we categorize that into 3 color-coded categories: green, less than a half of a nautical mile; orange, a half a mile to 1 mile; and greater than 1 nautical mile is red. For second quarter 2021, we saw 79% of the tracks stay under that half nautical mile deviation. It's a solid C+, not the best score that we've seen on these reports, but still the vast majority are staying within that half nautical mile of our preferential flight paths. Page 5 is our nighttime hourly operations report for second quarter 2021. This graph shows the average arrivals and departures by hour. Again, a different view of that flight quiet mode, average flight quiet mode start and stop time, where we break out all the arrivals and departures to better display how the airport is able to enter and exit flight quiet mode. As you'll see on the far right, the red bars represent the arrivals for second quarter 2021, well above where we were in the same quarter of last year, of course, due to the increase in operation levels. But that demand in arrivals really triggers the need to open up more runways to accommodate that demand and results in the airport coming out of flight quiet mode. However, on the left side of the page, on the bottom of the graph in green is our departures for second quarter 2021. As you'll recall in previous reports, especially before pre-COVID, those bars were much higher on the departure side. We didn't see as much departure demand into the later evening hours, so the airport was able to enter into flight quiet mode earlier, so much closer to that 10 p.m. Target time of nighttime. And again, the total average operations during the nighttime hours was 170, and 97 of those on average occurred in flight quiet mode. Page 6 is our runway use report for second quarter 2021. This report is for nighttime, not specific to flight quiet, but just for the nighttime hours as defined from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. As you can see, our average daily arrivals and departures for the quarter compared to first quarter of 2021. We're doing much better in the second quarter than we were in first quarter. At the bottom of the page, we have our utilization by runway ends for departures in green. 66% of the departures occurred on 10 left, 28 right, 37% in west flow, 29% in east flow. On the arrival side, 61% of the arrivals occurred on 10 center, 28 center, 30% in east flow, 31% in west flow. It is again important to note that runway 9 right, 27 left was closed and continues to be closed for that extension construction project, which is scheduled to be completed on December 2nd of this year. As a result, a lot of the arrivals that would normally be used on that runway did get pushed to the south airfield on 10 center, 28 center. So 10 center, 28 center getting a lot of heavy arrival usage as that runway on the north airfield is closed for construction. Page 7 is our flight quiet mode runway use report. So flight quiet mode, again, is defined by not so much time of day, but demand levels. And the arrows on the bottom, we have the breakout of utilization for our preferential runways that are defined in our current flight quiet program. For the second quarter 2021, 56% of the operations occurred on 10 left, 28 right for departures, 31% west flow, 25% east flow. We did see some departures on 4 left and 2 left as well as the 9 center, 27 center, and 10 center, 28 center getting some departure utilization. On the arrival side, 10 center, 28 center saw 71% of the arrivals were on that single runway. 10 center, 34% in east flow, 37% in west flow. We did see some utilization on the north airfield with 9 center, 27 center, as well as 10 left, 28 right, but the vast majority of arrivals occurred on 10 center, 28 center during flight quiet. Page 8, we have our nighttime arrival summary, where we summarize the operations and carriers that operated for our 2 most used arrival runways. Runway 10 center was one of our most used arrivals runway, and we have the breakout of all the carriers, the number of arrivals compared to the same quarter of the previous year. We also break that out in type of carrier, where we delineate between dedicated passenger as well as dedicated cargo operators. We saw 1,843 total arrivals on runway 10 center in the second quarter 2021. Most of those were by American Airlines as well as United. Frontier. So a lot of the dedicated passengers made up the majority of those operations. On the reciprocal side, 28 center arrivals, the same report where we break out all the air carriers arrival operations and compare that to second quarter of 2020. We saw 1,968 total arrivals in the second quarter on runway 28 center. And again, American and United made up the vast majority of those, as well as Frontier. We do see some operations by large operations by FedEx as well, with 112 total operations. Page 10 is our nighttime preferential flight track summary report, where we show the metrics for our deviation from the preferential departure flight paths. We are showing the most used departure runway 10 left departures here for second quarter 2021. In this report, we show the average deviation in nautical miles, and we color, again, those are color coded, where green represents a deviation then less than a half a nautical mile. Orange represents a deviation between a half and 1 nautical mile, and red represents a deviation greater than 1. So we're obviously looking for greens. We do have a bit of oranges and a couple of reds, except for one exception. The red was only one flight, so that's kind of a bit of a throwaway. But we do see Cathay Pacific Cargo with 23 departures did average over a 1 nautical mile deviation for this quarter. Again, but overall, the average deviation was less than half nautical mile, 0.27 nautical miles from our preferential departure runway flight path. On the opposite side, we have runway 28 right departures for second quarter 2021. Again, the vast majority are green, half mile deviation or less. We do have some oranges and a couple of reds, but those reds are mostly 1 or 2 operations. 1,047 total departures on runway 28 right for second quarter 2021, with an average deviation of 0.33 nautical miles. Page 12 shows the nighttime departure tracks graphically for the quarter, where we show all of the flight tracks in the second quarter 2021 that occurred in flight quiet mode as well as nighttime. And we color code those again by the amount of deviation from our preferential flight paths. There were 5,432 total departures in second quarter 2021. Of those, 3,389 occurred during flight quiet mode. 2,043 were outside of flight quiet mode. As you can see, 4 left, 10 left, and 28 right. We had a high percentage utilization of or sticking to that preferential departure path. However, 22 left, we did see deviations, especially in the half to 1 mile nautical mile, of 44% of the operations off that runway for the second quarter of 2021. And again, the nighttime departure tracks are shown to 3,000 feet mean sea level. And so when the aircraft do depart, air traffic assigns them along that preferential flight track until the aircraft reaches 3,000 feet. And then they are assigned a heading based on their destination. Page 13 shows our permanent noise monitor locations graphically around O'Hare of our 37 sites. Page 14 is our nighttime aircraft noise report for second quarter 2021. The nighttime aircraft noise report, we use the aircraft LEQ metric versus the DNL, since we are only looking at the nighttime hours between 10 and 7 and not the 24 hours. So the 24-hour day-night average sound level metric would not be applicable in this instance. For the second quarter 2021, You'll see a majority of monitors are showing red, which of course represents an increase of 1 decibel or more from the same quarter of the previous year. That is no surprise as we are comparing COVID-19 impact levels in 2020 versus recovery levels here in 2021. So much higher operations levels than we saw in second quarter 2020. And so we fully expect the aircraft noise levels to be higher comparing between those two quarters. We do have Site 45 reporting in Niles. That monitor was installed in May of 2021, so we did not have the full quarter. So that site was excluded from this report, but will be included in the third quarter 2021 report. Page 15 is our nighttime noise complaint report for second quarter 2021. This report, similar to the monthly reports where we show the number of verifiable households that made complaints in each month, as well as the quarter. However, this is for nighttime only versus the monthly reports where we show all hours. For the second quarter 2021, we had 262 verifiable households make complaints in April, 247 in May, and 255 in June, for a total of 16,281 noise complaints for second quarter 2021. Some of the communities that made the most noise complaints in the quarter were Chicago, specifically in wards 39 and 41, as well as Park Ridge, Itasca, Bensonville, and Bartlett. I will note that Bartlett and Bensonville, you can see that the number of verifiable households was only about 2 or 3 per month for those communities. In the lower right corner, we have our breakout of method of complaint and nature of complaint. Again, the website is the preferred method for filing noise complaints. 97.7% of the complaints were made through the website application. And aircraft noise represented 70.8% of the nature of complaints. A bit of a breakout further of, you can see frequency 14.7, low flying as well, 12.3% for second quarter 2021. Page 16 is our airline ground run-up report for second quarter 2021, where we show the utilization of our ground run-up enclosure. The utilization is for all hours of the day, not just nighttime, as maintenance run-ups do occur during all hours. The number of run-ups that occurred in second quarter 2021 were 212. Of those, 199 or 94% occurred within the GRE. So that is a great utilization for the GRE for second quarter 2021. You can see comparing to first quarter 2021, we had 90% utilization. We break out each of the major air carriers that do utilize the GRE for the second quarter. You can see American Eagle had the most run-ups in the quarter, and they had 100% utilization of the GRE. So that is a great A+ for American Eagle. Page 17, we break out the same report. However, instead of airlines, we show the different aircraft types that utilize the GRE for second quarter 2021 and compare that to first quarter. For second quarter 2021, you can see a lot of the medium to small aircraft do get close to or at 100% utilization of that ground run-up enclosure. Some of the larger aircraft, we don't always get 100% utilization, but those, you can see the number of run-ups are much smaller compared to the regional and narrow body aircraft. So 212 total run-ups in second quarter, 199 occurred within the GRE with a 94% usage rate. And now starting on page 18, we have our flight quiet daily log. As I mentioned earlier, we are now including this at the end of our flight quiet reports, where we delineate the start and stop time of flight quiet mode for every night in the quarter. So if you're interested, you can go through on a night-by-night basis and see the start and stop times, the duration in hours and minutes, that percentage of nighttime, how much flight quiet mode occurred during the nighttime hours, the breakout of arrivals and departures and total operations. We include every night for the entire second quarter, except for on the night of June 20th, we did have a bit of inclement weather move through the area that restricted the airport from actually entering into flight quiet mode at all. So that night we did not utilize flight quiet mode. And that completes the flight quiet program report for second quarter 2021.
Thank you, Ryan, for the ever stimulating flight quiet report. I don't know where I'd be without it. A few questions I have for you, then we'll open up to everybody else. What do we attribute the deviations or increased deviations to?
Yeah, good question. We can look into this a bit further. We haven't really dug into it deeply at this point, but my guess would be that we did in the second quarter did have a number of weather events that may have resulted in increased deviations. But I think it might be a good idea with this quarter, since we did not have a great percentage of staying within that half mile, that maybe we break that out a little bit further for this committee to look at closer. Considering that we had over the years great utilization, that maybe there's an outlier here that we're not aware of.
I have a theory, and it's just theory, but could it be that because of the decreased operations, the tower is giving aircraft the basically fly to destination rather than fly to a waypoint and then vector off?
I don't know that. We'd have to first look at the operations and see if there's something obvious that's occurring, and then I think the next step is to reach out to air traffic and see if they have any comments.
I think I would be interested in that. Additionally, 9C27C, it's now a new long runway, just as long effectively as the southern runway. Doesn't seem to be shouldering its fair share of operations. Do we have an idea of why that would be?
Not today, I do not. But that's something that we can investigate further as well.
As a community on the southern airfield, we were always promised that once the northern airfield got built out, they would take on a fair share of operations. So it doesn't seem to be happening. I don't know if I would like to know more information on why that is.
Absolutely.
All right.
I don't know this for a fact, but again, because of the construction operations that are occurring on the north airfield, that may impact utilization of 9th Center, but we'll definitely do some investigation and report back.
Thank you. We have hands up for Ernie and Frank. We'll start with Ernie. Ernie, go ahead.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. And I would like to echo Evan's concern. That is also my concern. I just ran through some of the recent reports. This seems to be the worst dispersion we've had in some time. And Ryan, I concur that probably could be the weather. But and to echo your point, Ryan, you got some one-offs here where if I got one operation like Boutique Air that misses the mark by almost 2 miles, that's fine. That's one aircraft. But I looked down this report, and as you mentioned, Cathay, but also you got this small carrier Volaris with, over 35 operations a night on both of those 2 runways in this report, both 2, 8, and 10. And they're missing the mark by, half a mile, it seems like on average, which means some of their aircraft are missing it by a bunch more. So, I guess that's what would be my concern is and maybe this speaks to Evan's next item here, which is the rewards program. But what do we do with an airline like Volaris, who consistently seems to miss? And it could be something as simple as, and I'll extrapolate, it could be something as simple as they were the smaller aircraft behind somebody larger taking off and the local wanted to get them out of the way, get them out of the pattern. But I don't know, but that would just seem to be a concern for me. And I don't know if that's something we can look into with that specific carrier, but you know, when you've got almost 40 operations a night or 80 total on those two runways and they're missing it by a half a mile, that skews this report, wouldn't it?
That would contribute to driving that number in the wrong direction, yes.
And then Ryan, a question for you that you know I've asked before. Where do we stand on the nav aids issue? And this could go back to Evan's concern about why aren't we using 9 center, 27 center on the North Airfield as much? Where do we stand on the nav aids being fully up and operational? Do you know?
I believe at this point, the majority of nav aids are finalized, although I'm not sure if we're fully Cat 3 capable at this point on 9 center, 27 center, but that would only be needed in very poor weather conditions. But we'll check back and verify the dates of when those navigational aids were commissioned.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Ryan, it sounds like we need to get some more information about that runway and what's going on with it, the utilization, the effectiveness, and the purpose of it. Mr. Ickes, good to see you,
Yes.
sir. The floor is yours.
Good to see you too, Mr. Chair. Ryan, could you please put the screen of the noise complaints back up so we can see what we're talking about here? Okay, that one's good. I'm going to focus on Ward 41 because that's what I'm here to do. You have April, May, and June, 50, 41, and 46 households complained. Can you further break that down into to see if those are households with or without sound and noise remediation? Or is that a figure that's available to you so that we can tell if the sound insulation is actually working a little bit, or if there's no difference between insulated and sound insulated as far as what people perceive to be too much noise? Is that possible?
Yeah, that is possible. We do have that information, and we can break that out.
Do you know offhand what the numbers are?
No, not offhand. No, I don't.
Okay.
But we can absolutely, I think at the next committee meeting, if you'd like, we can break this report out and show the numbers based on sound insulated versus non-insulated.
I mean, does CDA or your company have an idea if the insulation actually is doing what it's supposed to do? If it's cutting down on the noise complaints or not?
We have consistently heard positive feedback regarding the sound insulation program. So as far as we know, yes, it does make a significant difference.
Okay, well, I'd like to see if those numbers are consistent with, if those feelings are consistent with the numbers that we see here. Numbers don't lie. Sometimes people might, just, it's subjective, but numbers are real. So, okay, and one other quick thing, you talk about the deviations from the heading. At what point is that deviation measured during the flight? From takeoff to, when you say it's a half a nautical mile, more than a half a mile. At what point in the takeoff procedure is that measured?
So the deviation is measured at the exact point the aircraft reaches 3,000 feet. So you'll see some of these, if I zoom in here on a good example of a departure on, let's say 10 left, you can see this red line that goes right through the E in Park Ridge. The end of that line kind of touches Niles. At that point right there is when the aircraft hit 3,000 feet and is no longer part, or at least supposed to be on that preferential flight path. So the deviation is the distance between that point and the center line of our preferential departure flight path.
Okay, I had up till now never paid attention to the length of the red lines or green lines. So what you're saying is when the red line ends, that's where the aircraft reached 3,000 feet,
Correct.
and that's the above sea level, not ground level, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it was my understanding that the planes were not supposed to change directions or heading until they get to 3,000 feet.
Correct. That is the idea of the preferential flight paths, and that's why they're labeled red, because these were operations that were not doing what we wanted them to do. And so the point of this report is tracking those operations and even breaking them out by each of the airlines, as Mr. Kassauer mentioned. Cathay Pacific Cargo had 23 departures and averaged over a mile deviation. So that all those 23 operations that occurred in second quarter 2021 off of runway 10 left, they were averaging more red tracks than they were green or orange.
Does the airport have any legal authority to command them to stay on the flight path until they get to 3,000 feet? Or is this a safety issue or what?
So the our flight quiet manual does describe the procedure for the program, and it is again, air traffic is able to utilize these preferential departure paths as long as it is safe and the demand levels allow for it. And so it is voluntary. The airport does not have any legal leverage that they can do to force airlines to use these. It is still voluntary. If the pilot needs to deviate from the preferential flight path, they are absolutely allowed to do that for whatever reason they seem fit. Air traffic may sometimes have the aircraft deviate as well. As Ernie mentioned, sometimes it's a slower aircraft that they need to get out of the way, or some other factor when in regards to safety or efficiency that may require deviation from our preferential flight paths. So again, the intent is for the majority of aircraft to stay on these preferential flight paths as much as possible. We report back to this committee on how well that's happening. And in this instance, it's been some time since we've seen, most of the reports have been very good. But this is an example of when this committee has an opportunity now to look a little bit further and see if there's some follow-up needed, either with air traffic or maybe even airlines, as to their compliance with this program.
Yeah, it would seem to me that if you were to overlay the sound insulated contours and this map that you're showing right here, and then look at the number of noise complaints that we've had, that I would say 90% of them or more would come from outside of the contour area where these deviations and flight patterns are taking place. So it's an interesting set of maps that you've put up, and it gives us a lot to work on. Thank you. But I never realized up till this minute that the length of the traces, particularly the red traces, the length of them tells it all. It tells the whole story. Planes are deviating well before the 3,000 feet altitude, which is what, 2,400 feet above our rooftops. And that's what people are complaining about, especially at night. So thank you, Ryan. Excellent report.
And again, I just want to follow up with one thing, just to point out, we are focusing in on the reds, but just you'll see on the bottom on the table there, the amount of operations we had, that's only 165 of the total 2,043 departures that occurred in flight quiet mode deviated over a mile. So it is, again, it stands out a little bit because we haven't seen it kind of at this level recently. However, still the vast majority are occurring within that half mile center line of the preferential departure path.
Well, it would be very interesting to see if you can count those red traces and see if it comes close to the number of nighttime noise complaints.
Well, there's
It would tell the whole story right there.
We can count those, actually. It's
Those are-
165.
165 and, here's the number of complaints for each month. So almost 600 complaints, over 600 complaints.
Okay, well, if we look at Ward 41 again, that's who I'm here to represent. If you say the total is 165 and Ward 41 has 50, 41, and 46 households for a total of 2,076 complaints, I'd say we're getting a very high percentage of noise complaints, total noise complaints, and that backs it up. So thank you very much. I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you, Frank. The veterans of this committee, and I go back to 2016, and there are members here who've been on longer, will recall a term, spaghetti maps, that we used to look at.
Yeah.
We're starting to look, the deviations are starting to look like a spaghetti map again. Just to clarify, Ryan, you mentioned that the pilot can turn when they want to. If I'm not mistaken, the FAA still regulates the airspace, so they would need permission they can't just meander around the airspace as
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes, very, very good point. Yes, no, the pilot has to make a request or at least communicate that they have a need to deviate, and air traffic usually always complies with it unless there's some factor that the pilot is not aware of. But it's the pilot in command is always in charge of the aircraft and where they're flying. But in the airspace over Chicago, the air traffic is regulated by air traffic control.
Well, let's log this as a concern. May not be a trend. Let's keep our eye on this. And if this does appear to be a trend, we may need to start engaging with the FAA, which I believe is was one of the key steps we did when we started to contain that spaghetti map that we used to fight with. I don't want to get all like.
Yeah, this committee used to, meet with air traffic on a fairly regular basis to discuss these, but then compliance got so good that the need was really no longer there. So as you said, Chairman, maybe this is an outlier, but it's definitely worth looking into more.
Well, if possible, I'd like you between these meetings, if you could engage and look into this a little further to see if this is the pilots choosing to deviate or air traffic controllers initiating the deviation. I think that would be an important thing for us to learn about.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else have any questions for Landrum and Brown regarding the Fly Quiet report? Once, twice, moving on. If you guys recall, before we hit the summer, which everything went kind of wild in the summer for about 6 weeks, and we started locking it down. Before that, we were talking about Fly Quiet recognition. So I want to revisit that. I'd like to my goal would be to get Fly Quiet recognition in place prior to the start of the runway rotation plan. So we've got some time, but I want to get it in place before then. So at least the airlines are aware of it. So Ryan, can you bring us back to where we were and then where we're going?
Sure. So as you recall, I think we left off back in earlier this year, it might have been in April. We did start talking about some of the elements or metrics that we can include as part of a Fly Quiet recognition program. So I've broken out kind of the three major categories that the committee, at least the consensus was that we wanted to look at. The first being the preferential flight tracks that we just discussed at length here. Obviously, the goal of that program is to encourage operators to direct aircraft over less populated areas to limit the effects of noise on the surrounding communities. Again, this is for the current Flight Quiet program. And our way of measuring this, as we just discussed, is measuring the deviation of those Flight Quiet mode departures in nautical miles from the preferential flight track. For the Flight Quiet recognition program, we would look at the annual average of an air carrier's departures, all departures in Flight Quiet mode. with 0 nautical miles being like the perfect score. An air carrier that sticks dead on with those preferential flight paths will get 100%. I highly doubt that we'll have any of those, but just to kind of explain the metric, 100% would be best. The next category is ground run-ups. So for utilization of our ground run-up enclosure, the goal of the program is to encourage operators at O'Hare to utilize that GRE whenever possible to minimize noise generated from engine run-ups. The measure would be comparing the annual percentage utilization of the GRE to the annual percentage utilization, excuse me, doing a lot of talking today. Comparing the annual utilization of the alternate locations for run-ups. And again, as we saw, American Eagle got 100% in second quarter 2021. So that would be the highest score. Another category that we discussed is fleet quality. The idea here is to encourage air carriers to fly the quietest aircraft that they have in their fleet during the overnight hours, and even perhaps encourage air carriers to get rid of some of the older, louder aircraft in their fleet and replace them with newer, quieter aircraft. And so our thought here is to utilize the FAA's aircraft certification process, where they each aircraft that is certified to operate in the U.S. Gets certified at a different noise stage level. Stage 5 is the current official, the best stage, I guess, to lack of a better term at this point. And so comparing an aircraft's fleet to stage 5 would be the metric. And so an air carrier that has all of their aircraft fleet that operate at O'Hare that meet stage 5 standards would get 100% score. We did talk about a little bit about the preferential runways and tracking those. However, I think that's something that we can, depending on when this flight quiet program recognition goes into effect, whether or not that be, I think that would be included once we have a new flight quiet program versus the existing flight quiet program, because of our construction projects that we have going on this year and poor utilization, what's left of the actual runways that are identified as preferential at this point. So I'll leave that to the committee on how they want to handle the preferential runways. So going back to the scoring, just so everyone has an idea of what we're looking at. Again, our thought is to use the 0 to 100% scoring system. I've got a lot of kids in school. This makes sense to me. So basically a 90% or better is an A, and you go down from there. So I think that's kind of the easiest understood score to use. We would, of the 3 categories that we're talking about, average departure, deviations, ground run-ups, fleet mix rating, we would average all 3 of those categories to come up with a final flight quiet score. We also looked at what carriers were actually applying these metrics to. We decided that, and again, we'll look for feedback from the committee if you agree, that an air carrier must have at least 1 average nightly operation at the airport over the year in order to be considered in the ranking for the flight quiet recognition. So that would exclude some of these, like a cargo operator that may operate 4 times a year or something like that. In this table here, I've got a sample of how we would score the airlines. So this is entirely made up, Acme Airlines here. We would delineate between dedicated passenger, dedicated cargo, or a mixed operator. Total operations for the year or the quarter, 3,770. Average operation, so 20.8. So that would be well above that one average nightly operation cutoff. They would have the average departure deviation 0.27. So again, that's an average of all the departure deviations that airline tracked. That would result in a 73% score in that category. So again, 100% is perfect. So this was, a solid C for this airline. Ground run-ups, again, percentage utilization. How many run-ups did they do for the year? How much did it occur within that GRE? 86% occurred within the GRE for this airline. And then we apply that fleet mix rating. And again, we take all the that Pacific Airlines aircraft that fly out of O'Hare, and we compare that to the FAA's certified noise certification levels, so stages 2, 3, 4, and 5. So basically, if you think of, in this case, this airline received a 3.1 score. That means that on average, their fleet more closely compared to stage 3 aircraft versus a stage 5 would be perfect. So 62% for their fleet mix rating. And you average all three of those scores together for a 74% fly quiet score.
Hey, Ryan, can I stop you there?
Yes.
I at the risk of overcomplicating this, I think we need to consider a couple things. And Karen, I see your hand up, and I've got a feeling you got to piggyback on this. I don't know if we should be weighting these three issues equally. So a ground run-up is probably less important than deviation from a flight track. Ground run-ups really only the inner communities can hear a ground run-up, as opposed to a deviation of over a mile, which can be impacting people that don't have soundproofing at all. So I think we need to look at weighting this. And then also, the quietest aircraft is the aircraft that doesn't fly. So if we're really trying to look at nighttime operations, I think we should probably put in a metric of what percentage of operations are the airlines doing during the 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So if I've got 100 operations in a given period, and 10 of those are at nighttime, 90% of my operations during the day, 10% in the evening, I think there should be some consideration of that, because hopefully, if this program gets off the ground, so to speak, maybe a flight manager would consider getting the cargo aircraft done during the daytime, as opposed to launching it at 3 a.m. in the morning. Thoughts?
All great points. And actually that your first point was one of my first questions of this committee, because that's something, as I mentioned in the past, the previous, when this commission did have a flight quiet awards program, they did apply different weightings to these categories. For instance, maybe ground run-ups is only 20% of the score versus flight quiet deviations is 40 or 50%. We can break it out however much this committee thinks each category, what weight level they think is most important. But yes, that's something we can easily do with these metrics. And I think we should as well, to your point. The second point, yes, I think that's a great idea that we can absolutely break out the, how not only what type of aircraft they are flying, but also the frequency and time of day they're flying, and apply a score based on that. Are they flying more during the day? Are they flying more of their louder aircraft during the day, thereby maybe getting a higher score than someone who's flying more at night with their louder aircraft at night?
I'd like to recognize the venerable chair of the Fly Quiet Committee, Karen.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts and suggestions. First, I might suggest that once we kind of decide on what metrics we think we like, we run a test report to make sure it shakes out the way we intended. My concern is just that there's a lot of nuance to the many airlines that are flying at O'Hare, and that the recognition doesn't end up going to airlines who have it easy, right? They're flying 1 or 2 flights. They it's easy not to deviate. And with that, I thought it might be worth breaking the airlines into categories based on number of, flights. Ryan, I'll leave that to you guys. You're the experts, but we know that there are different categories of airlines and what those characteristics are. And it might be beneficial then to be able to recognize multiple airlines in different categories based on those characteristics, right? Like we know that United and American have a harder time with the ground run-ups with their larger aircraft. So penalizing them versus like American Eagle when they have the smaller aircraft and it's easier. I think if you split it, you can still recognize people who are maybe making an effort without them saying, well, we're never going to beat American Eagle, so we're not even going to try. And then I think we should look at some most improved categories when we start to get into multiple like years or quarters or however we break this out, just so that there's multiple speaking points of not only, you don't always have to be the best, but if you've made improvements, oh, look at that. We're already on the same page. So,
Yeah.
so those were just my thoughts. And I think once we see that report, I thought Evan had some good points about weighting as well. I think there's a lot of speaking points. I'd love to see like a 1-page sheet for each airline that we could mail out that says, here's how you scored, here are suggestions on areas where you can improve, and then, see if they're interested in meeting. But those are just my thoughts. I think this is a great program and I'm excited to see it implemented.
Great feedback, Karen. Thank you so much. I'll recognize the gentleman from Park Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. Along the lines of the GRE, the only thing I wanted to mention is, some of the airlines are never going to use the GRE, and I'm wondering if we, not wondering, I think we should give consideration to the airlines that are there that are doing maintenance every night and have to go use the GRE, and that some of their fleet, to Karen's point, can't get into it. So I wouldn't want to penalize an airline simply because they have maintenance on field, which requires them to do a run-up before operation. And I think the point of weighting it absolutely makes sense. I actually did some study on some of these programs, and I think that's something, Chair, that maybe we should take a look at, is to see, I realize if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, but there are some airports out there. I think I saw Vancouver has had a awards program for 16 years. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't do this committee a lot of good in formulating a program of seeing what else is out there and what other people have done. The funny thing is, it seems to me, and Ryan, maybe you could speak to this, I noted that the majority of the programs that I could find out there are all West Coast airports, which I guess makes sense to me. But they operate under a whole bunch of different operational circumstances that we don't operate under here. And then the final point is, and this is just something I want to throw out, and from a regulatory standpoint, Ryan, do we have any concerns that whatever we do here has to or is covered by something or Part 150?
No, I wouldn't have any concerns as far as the Part 150 point. As far as what other airports are doing, I know it's been a long time, but when we first started talking about this, we did do kind of a summary of a lot of different major programs that are out there and what they incorporate in their programs. And Maura, maybe I'll check with Maura and we can recirculate that slide deck. That's probably over a year ago at this point. But all great feedback. I think, Chairman, are there any other questions before we kind of?
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Go on, Ryan.
Brian here from Norwich has got a comment. How about we give out an award for some of the biggest abusers, like the exploding head for passenger and cargo, the people who don't or who get very poor scores, to let the general public know that so-and-so airline, if you fly it, they're not following the noise requirements. Just a thought.
Brian, I love you for that. My whole mission on this started out with the shame them and name them approach, where I wanted to take out billboard ads along Interstate 90, shaming these aircraft. I was told, I was suggested by CDA and our partners that maybe we should go with the carrot approach first, Evan. So we're gonna go with
Okay.
the carrot approach, but I think we're gonna start collecting the data. And so it's not lost on me that the shame them and name them could be a future endeavor that we partake on.
Or at least send them a letter, so that nobody, not to the public, but send them a letter that, hey, you're not complying.
Well, I think
And we're
Karen,
watching it.
that's a great idea. I think Karen mentioned that almost as, I view this as almost a report card, just like students get a report card and say, hey, you're
Yep.
failing this subject. We send a report card and say, hey, you only got a 23 on your Fly Quiet awards program or whatever we're calling this. And let them know and put them on notice that we're monitoring this, we're keeping them notice, and there are opportunities to improve.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? I got Dennis with your hand up. My main man, Dennis.
Years back, we used to have this program, as I think Ryan mentioned. And we used to, at one time, also notify airlines, as I remember, if they were really doing, going out of their bounds where they're supposed to, and breaking the spaghetti map, as we used to say. And I think if we look back into our archives, we might be able to find a lot of this information and use it to work on to maybe put together a really good program.
Thanks, Dennis. We value your elder statement status on this to bring us back to what we've already done. We're all reinventing the wheel over here sometimes. Thank you.
Yep.
Ryan, back to you. Frank, we'll get you in a second.
So at this point, some of the considerations, we'd like some feedback from the committee, which we've already gotten quite a bit of really excellent feedback here today, is, as Karen mentioned, do we want to delineate categories? And I think what we're going to do is, based on what we've heard today, is the next time we talk about this topic, we'll have a kind of a full report that'll list out all the airlines and kind of see if there's a clean way to delineate categories, so that some of the smaller airlines don't skew the data from some of the larger airlines. We would incorporate not only the weighting as we discussed, or some ideas of the weighting that we can start to tweak, as well as a metric that includes airline schedules, as well as what types of aircraft they're flying. And then, as Karen mentioned, also some of the categories that we may want to consider in these recognition program is, do you want to, call out, maybe the best cargo airline because their operations are a bit smaller or different than some of the major passenger carriers. The most improved, I think, is a good one to, keep track of. And well, what are we actually calling these awards? I think this committee needs to come up with, whatever name they want to give this recognition program. And there's different levels of awards, a tier 1, 2, or 3 of that nature. So I think a lot of us good feedback today that we'll come back with to this committee the next time we have this on the agenda. And so more work to do.
I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Ward 41, Mr. Ickes. Mr. Ickes, you're muted. Mr. Ickes, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I had some technical difficulties here. We lost electricity in our home, so it was a planned outage, and it happened at the worst time. But anyway, along these lines and your comments about shame and name, can we send a memo out to the airlines just reminding them of the 3,000 feet above sea level guideline, that they should try to adhere to it more often? Let's be direct and let them know what our concerns are, because the FAA and the CDA has sound insulated thousands of homes, as we know, and these aircraft should try to stick to the heading that they're taking off on, rather than deviating well below 3,000 feet and going on their merry way, and leave us, otherwise, we can have the mayor of Chicago put up a deviation cam on a satellite and make this a revenue generating offense if they do that. So I'd be more than happy to mention it to her. Thank you.
I appreciate your thought. I would like to see this as a comprehensive program. So when we do give out these report cards, Karen's idea of ways of listing the ways to improve and saying, if you get your deviations back in line, that can improve your score. I think that would be a great way to do this. The idea of a deviation camera, I'll refer to the City of Chicago Department of Finance. Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a basic question. So I've been on this committee since 2012, and we've discussed all these issues. We've made improvements, right? Things have gotten better, things have gotten worse, depending on how you look at it. And putting this program together, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm trying to figure out, as I listen to everybody, what we're going to accomplish and how we're going to accomplish it. And I say that because we've already interacted with all the, or most of the airlines, right? There's a program in place. So what in this do we believe is going to drive further compliance, I guess is my question.
It's a great question. The way I'm viewing this is we're going to be coming up with an entirely, and it's not just we, there's going to be an entirely new Fly Quiet program. I would like this. I envision the awards program to grow with that new Fly Quiet program to increase adherence to it, as well as maybe in its purest sense, and I don't think it's going to be out of day one, but say Alaska Airlines, the smaller airlines compared to the big ones out of O'Hare, really does a good job on sticking with the Fly Quiet program. We should acknowledge them. So maybe conceivably somebody else who wouldn't normally fly them would consider flying on Alaska Airlines, give them some free PR. But really, it's a new program. We're trying to get a awards package to go along with it to increase acknowledgement and adherence. That's how I'm viewing this.
Okay, and thank you. And I'm hopeful. Like I say, I'm not against the program. I just want to throw it out in the air that, as we're putting this together, that there needs to be something more to it than what we've done in the past if we're looking for a different outcome than we had in the past. So I applaud the effort, and I'm hoping for the best on this, and appreciate the leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. That brings up another good point, though, too. We're coming up with the runway rotation program, which is going to have dedicated runways in certain weeks. Should we have a metric for adhering to those runways? Right.
Yeah, I think, yes, that should eventually be incorporated once we do have a final plan in place. And I think that metric can kind of easily be included in what we're developing here. But yes, I think that's going to be an essential metric assuming that's included, once you have a final new program.
Ryan, with today's feedback, would it be premature to ask you to come up with a draft program, including weighting and just the metrics of how we're going to do this? We can start reviewing this and providing feedback on an actual program itself.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. And if you want to shoot for the November meeting or a subsequent meeting, it's up to you.
I think let's shoot for November. Just as a draft program, there will be, we want to make this as quantifiable as possible, but there is the inherent qualifiable ideas such as weighting that we're going to need to hash out. And so that's where Karen's idea of back testing probably comes into play.
Okay, we'll work on that and have something for you guys to chew on at the next meeting.
All right, great. That's great feedback. Anything else regarding the Fly Quiet Awards program? All right, seeing none. The next ONCC Technical Committee meeting will be November 16th, 2021. With that, we'll open it up to comments from ONCC members. Do we have comments? Once, twice, seeing none. Comments from the audience. Mr. Dwyer.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Good to see you.
I appreciate it. I guess this is my annual time in the year where the disappointment starts to set in that the permanent noise monitors from 2015 may or may not be commissioned this year. My understanding is there are 3 that are close and 1 that perhaps isn't. Is that my understanding correct?
Yes, and hi, this is Valdana. There are 3 that are closed, yes. I believe we had 4 remaining as part of the commitment. So 2 of those we're working on. We're giving a bonus site, which is site 46, to replace the long-term portable monitor. And then we have 3 left to do next year. 2 of those are part of the commitment. One of them is a replacement site for an old site in Ward 41 that was decommissioned. So yeah, we're completing 3 this year. We're leaving 3 for next year. We have budgeted for those 3 for next year.
But the 3 for this year are from the 2015 commitment? Is that
2 of
correct?
those are from the commitment, and then 2 of the ones for next year are from the initial commitment.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's unfortunate OMP is going to be complete and, you know, there's city residents still waiting for noise monitors. I hope it can be moved up in the priority list, that I don't ask about this again a year from now, as it's sort of become my Groundhog Day moment. I do have a second question about the new monitors. The ANMS aircraft noise report has modeled OMP build-out DNLs. And the new monitors, they're currently listed as NA or not applicable. Isn't there a grid point analysis of OMP in the DNL values that could be applied to these? So there is some point of comparison, or are these new monitors outside that study area?
Question.
Ryan, you want to take this?
Yeah, so there is a grid point analysis done for OMP, however, not specific to those sites. We'll have to go back and look and see if that was run specific to those areas. They may be well outside the study area that was done for the grid point analysis. Some of those are pretty far east, but that's something we can look at.
I think that'd be a useful comparison. They're sort of orphans without that column to compare to that all the other monitors do. So thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll
George with the
second.
motion, Dennis with the second. Please call the roll.
Bensonville,
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
41st Ward. Sorry, Frank.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Hanover Park,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes.
Norridge,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Rolling Meadows. I have her vote. She's having audio problems. Schaumburg,
Yes.
School District 59. Still here. Wooddale,
Yes.
did I miss anyone? Okay, all good.
Thank you for your time. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Aye.